Hey guys, Miss White here from Michigan. This first video here, there are going to be two this week, as you'll see. This first video that you are currently watching will focus on the European theater for World War II. So all this week, we're going to talk about the battles of the war. World War II lasted 6 years, technically, from 1939 until 1945. So in this amount of time, I'm going to try and go as fast as possible to avoid a super long video for you guys talking about just the European battles for right now. As you will see from my slides, there's a lot of information on them. I'm very passionate about this, and I mostly focused on World War II in college. So without further ado, let's get going. All right, I would make my screen bigger, but it freezes every time I try. So bear with me on this. So when I say theater, I'm talking about a section of the war. I'm not talking about like go and see a play or a musical, all right? So the European theater, there's the European theater, the African theater, and the Pacific theater that we will be focusing on this week. Like I just said, and like you can see right there, we're focusing on the European theater for right now. So really quick, I'm not going to go into too much detail about a lot of this because you guys are going to have to read through this here yourselves. But the Battle of Britain, these go in chronological order. So this is the first major battle that I'm going to talk about. Unfortunately for you, I just picked the ones that interest me. Obviously, there are a lot of battles, again, a war that lasts 6 years. There's a lot that happens. But the Battle of Britain is a very interesting one because this was a battle fought almost entirely in the skies with the air forces. They called fighting in the skies dogfights. So we had the German Luftwaffe, which is fun to say, versus the Royal Air Force of England. Remember, Great Britain here, I'm sorry, not England. Britain consists of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. So the Nazis were bombing all of those countries, but they did most of their energy in London, which is the capital of England and one of the most famous capital cities around the world. Anyway, Hitler wanted to some fun facts that I'm learning. I'm reading a book about this right now. Hitler didn't want to get England involved in another war because they remember from World War I, 1914, that when England got involved, the war became a lost cause for Germany. So Hitler knew this and didn't want England to actually join the fight. So Hitler tried his best, after a few small bombing campaigns, to just negotiate a peace treaty with Churchill, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. And they tried, like, hey, like, we'll stop bombing you if you just sign this peace deal with us. Winston Churchill, being my personal favorite free world leader, being who he was, he said no, because he saw how bad that turned out for France. France signed a peace treaty with Germany and they became Nazi occupied. And Winston Churchill basically said he'd rather be dead than let that happen. So the Battle of Britain ensued. Again, it was mostly a bombing campaign, right? There's Winston Churchill pictured on the left. I feel for Winston Churchill as I do for Joseph Stalin, to put that in perspective. He's awesome, as we'll continue to talk about him. The guy pictured on the right is Hermann Goring, which is how you say that, Goring, like boring, only with the G. That guy sucks. We'll talk a lot about him next week when we talk about the Holocaust. He will get tried for war crimes, but spoiler alert, he ends up killing himself in prison. We'll get to that later, though. So anyway, that guy sucked, put it into perspective, and especially compared to Winston Churchill, like, come on. All right, so I'll let you read through that. Another fun fact for you, even though I already mentioned it in my slides, I just want to talk about it some more because it's Winston Churchill. That's not Winston Churchill there, but he is famous for, a lot of people in London were known to just go outside and look at the battle happening in the sky above them. As you can see in this picture here, a guy with his binoculars looking into the sky to see what he can see. Churchill did that all the time, and it bothered people, being the leader of England. People are like, you, Winston, go ahead and get in the bomb shelter, dude. And Churchill's like, no, I'm going to watch it, which I think is like way cool, by the way. I digress about Winston Churchill for right now. We'll get to him much later, though. And, you see some pictures of the destruction of the war, and people lived in subway tunnels for this. Some people did. If your house didn't have a bomb shelter or you lived in like an apartment building, people lived in the subway tunnels. Put that in perspective. If any of you have ever been on the Boston T downtown, the subway trains downtown, and they're gross and a fun place to get some weird communicable disease. Yeah, fun times. But hey, that beats getting bombed to death, right? So whatever you got to do to survive. The main area of focus when I was in college for me was this, Operation Barbarossa. Really quick, Hitler, remember, signed a non-aggression pact with Stalin in 1939 to split up Poland. Everything was happy and coexisting. Yay! Shocking to hopefully none of you, Hitler broke the pact. In 1941, he invaded Russia, which, come on, Adolf, really? So anyway, there you got some flamethrowers, which are cool, all that fun stuff. You'll learn that Hitler studied Napoleon in depth. Napoleon, we talked about him, great Napoleon leader, help me, a great French leader, right? So Hitler studied him. Okay, what did he do wrong? Oh, I'll have to do this differently. As you can imagine, it did not work out very well. By the way, the memes for World War II are out of this world. If you find a really funny one that you think is appropriate, send it to me. I'd love to look at them. Briefly, I talk about this. The Siege of Leningrad. This isn't really a battle. There was a battle at first, but more or less it turned into a siege where the Nazis encircled the entire city of Leningrad, or we now know it as St. Petersburg, right? No one was allowed in or out of the city. So people were essentially starving. As you can see from these pictures here, it's not very good. People resorted to cannibalism. Yep. Survival instincts. Remember, these are drastic times. We think it's bad right now that, you can't get toilet paper or you can't find hand sanitizer anywhere, right? It's basically like what we're living through right now, but like a billion times worse, right? No one was allowed to leave. They were in complete lockdown, quarantine, because if you stepped outside, the Nazi soldiers would probably shoot you dead, right? So these people really had to resort to drastic things just to survive. Whenever cannibalism pops up in history, it is because something so terrible is happening to them that is their last resort, right? And included in here, I found a cannibalistic poem from someone who lived through this. So I'll let you read that later. It's a little graphic, but hey, whatever, it's war. Speak of graphic, this is the Battle of Stalingrad. A lot of fun facts for you here. And again, I'll try and talk fast. I realize that's not happening right now, but I'll try. Battle of Stalingrad is the largest and bloodiest battle in all of human history. War has been happening since the dawn of time, since people figured out what weapons were, right? This is the worst battle that ever happened, ever. Okay? Battle of Stalingrad, which is now Volgograd, Russia, which you don't really need to know. Huge industrial city, but also Hitler wanted to get this city because it has Stalin's name. So nothing will be worse for your enemy than conquering the city with your leader's name right in the title of it, right? And so Stalin knew this, and Stalin took this very seriously as well. This was the battle where Stalin told every man, woman, and child living in Stalingrad, the city of Stalingrad, regardless of your age, regardless of your gender, your job is to shoot and kill Nazis. If you don't, and if you refuse, we will shoot you ourselves. So, which again, hopefully that's not shocking to you. Stalin was crazy. Remember, he heard voices in his head. Yikes, I get too excited. So literally everybody was fighting. And this battle, as you can see in these pictures, took place in the streets of the city. When I say battlefield, I'm sure just like me, a lot of you probably think of a wide open space. World War II was fought in the streets of cities, right? For the most part, except when we get to the Pacific Theater, which, trust me, that's even worse, right? So both sides being dictators, this is where you got to know your enemies. Hitler was like, I don't care, you got to kill the commies, right? Like, if you die, oh well, we will send more people over to the front. Stalin had the same mindset because he's a dictator. I don't care if my people die, as long as we don't lose the overall battle. If you have to die so the Nazis don't take over this city, that's fine by me. So that made this front, Operation Barbarossa, so deadly, is because both sides were controlled by dictators. They didn't care. Whereas in the Battle of Britain, Winston Churchill didn't want his citizens to die. So I'm sorry you have to live in subway tunnels. It sucks, but we got to do it to survive. Stalin and Hitler are like, I don't care. Here, little 10-year-old Timmy, take this AK-47 and shoot some Nazis. Like, what? That's what made this battle so destructive, because not only was it fought in the streets of the city, but again, you're giving these insane assault rifles and these insane tasks to little 10-year-olds, maybe even younger, right? So that's the Battle of Stalingrad. This is a video clip. It's not very gory at all. I promise you, it's more informational than anything else. I will warn you when things get graphic, all right? Because again, it's battles. It's not going to be pretty, right? We got Operation Overlord, which is an awesome name in of itself. We more famously know this as D-Day. All right. D-Day was on June 6, 1944. It is when the Allied troops, so America, this is also the British Empire coming in and helping out America. It's mostly Americans, but we also had Canadians, Australians, actual British folk, right? This is when we invaded France. Normandy is in France, northern France there. We invaded France to try and free Europe from Nazi control. Right? So that's what D-Day was. D-Day does not specifically stand for anything. I'll say that right now. Everyone's like, what does the D stand for in D-Day? It literally just means like, this is the day that we go and do our business. You can call D-Day to anything, whether it's the start of a battle, the start of liberating Nazi-occupied Europe or whatever. All right. Again, this is mostly by us. We were in charge of it. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who later became president of the United States, was in charge of this. So really quickly, I'm going to spend some time talking about D-Day because it is probably one of the more important battles that we talk about. All right, so we've seen pictures like this. When it says amphibious landing right here, that means we started out in the water and we eventually invaded by land once the boats got to the shore. We also had people drop in by air. So this battle had everything. As you can see, here are soldiers going to the shores. This is a beach, a nice little beach, by the way. You can't tell from this picture, but you will tell from the video clip in just a second. Up here, looks like it's just a cliff, a smoky cliff. The Nazis were actually on this cliff in bunkers. All right. They were actually on this cliff. They saw the American ships coming. And so they got their machine guns ready. And the second that this side of the boat here went down to let the soldiers out, the Nazis were ready to shoot them with machine guns. There are a lot of stories of people who actually didn't even make it out of the boat before they were shot dead. Some people also drowned because the boats couldn't get too close, right? So some people drown. I mean, look at the backpacks on their backs. So imagine that you go into battle and you don't even make it to fight the enemy. You just drown. And you will see it in the video clip coming up, which is very graphic, by the way. So again, here's a boat. You'll see more of it. Well, you can see here, there's a lot of stuff. Tanks eventually came to the beach. Here you can see things from the air, everyone unleashing hell onto Normandy. So I'll have you read a speech from our general, Dwight D. Eisenhower, also known as Ike. He's a really cool guy. Here he is pictured there. We'll talk more about him when we get to the Cold War. His speech is one of the best speeches I've ever read, but I'm biased, so take that with a grain of salt. This is a video clip that is graphic. It's from the movie Saving Private Ryan. If you're into war movies, I highly recommend that you watch it. It is rated R, though, so make sure you have permission to do so. It is one of the best war movies I've ever seen, and I try to avoid war movies because I think they're sometimes inaccurate or they romanticize certain things that shouldn't be romanticized. This clip is from one of the opening scenes of the entire movie when they are invading Normandy. They're storming Omaha Beach, which is the most famous beach landing of the D-Day invasion. Again, this is gory because it is an accurate depiction of what the battle was like. So if you don't like gory things, I highly recommend you don't watch it. It also is kind of loud, so make sure your volume is down because, guns go boom, right? All right, without further ado, this was the Battle of the Bulge. This one was the last German offensive. What that means, this was Germany's last chance. They knew this. You see the dates here, 1944 to 1945. The war ends in 1945, right? Hitler knew that he was going to lose the war. right? Everyone knew, right? So this was Germany's last hoorah, their Hail Mary, if you will. If you're any of you are sports fans, you throw a Hail Mary, and or like when you throw a basketball and the buzzer buzzes right as the ball is midair and you make the winning hoop or whatever. Hitler was throwing that basketball last second there to make sure. All right, spoiler alert, he lost. But it was a surprise attack on the Americans. It was mostly Americans. More Americans died in the Battle of the Bulge than any other battle in the entire war. It doesn't help that there is also a giant massacre, right? As you can see here, 84 American prisoners of war were killed right on the spot, right? Which, yes, in the grand scheme of things, only 84 people to compare to the 2 million people that were lost at Stalingrad, whatever. But America, being a democratic nation, we care about our citizens dying in war, right? Again, know your enemy. All right, so there's the Battle of the Bulge. Again, warning, some graphic pictures, because, yikes, they fought a war in the snow. Can you imagine? Anyway, all right, this one's super graphic, and actually it's the most messed up part. So again, bear with me as I go on a rant on this, all right? The firebombing of Dresden. Dresden is a city in Germany, all right? Beautiful, old, ancient city, beautiful cathedrals and architecture. It's insane. And had we have lost the war, had America lost the war, we would have been tried for war crimes for this, because this broke almost every single law of war there is. Yes, there are laws of war. All right. So what we did, we teamed up with England and we divided bombing this city. We go at night, they go during the day. Right. And we dropped incendiary bombs on the city of Dresden, Germany. Incendiary bombs are bombs that when they explode, fire goes everywhere, right? There's a flammable substance in them. It ignites and there's fire everywhere. Think like napalm almost. Okay. And if you don't know what napalm is, when we get to Vietnam, you'll know what it is, unfortunately. It's terrible, right? So we dropped these bombs on the city. Now, because it's a bombing campaign, the people of Dresden were in their bomb shelters, right? Because that's where you logically go when there is a bombing campaign. But these were incendiary bombs. And the heat was too intense. If you leave the bomb shelter, you get burned alive, which is awful. But if you stay in the bomb shelter, as many people did, they got baked to death. Like, an oven, because that's essentially what their bombing shelter turned into. So warning, the next few pictures are graphic as all get out because, it's war. You can't ignore the past, even if it makes you uncomfortable, right? So here's Dresden after the city was firebombed. That's not too graphic, a lot of cities looked like that. It's pretty terrible. Here's a stack of the dead bodies. Some in the city center of Dresden, right? Here are people with their skin completely melted off of their faces. As you can see, that is a baby almost. We did this. America and England, the winners of the war, the good guys, if you will. And, don't get me wrong, right? We're heroes, American heroes. But we didn't always do the right thing. Okay, so this is war. Obviously, compared to other things, this isn't so bad considering, next week we're going to talk about the Holocaust. Obviously, this is not as bad as the Holocaust, right? But it's important to me that you see this, that you see that war sucks. We do terrible things just to win the war. But this did violate war law because you're technically not supposed to target civilians, right? You're not supposed to at all. You're supposed to only target the enemy. And usually the enemy can be found with someone with a gun in their hand. These were innocent people of Dresden. Okay, I'm sure that there were some soldiers in the city. Sure, why not? I mean, Europe at this time, if any man from 18 years of age to older was probably a soldier, but you don't target civilian populations for no reason at all. At all. Same with the dropping of the atomic bombs, which we will get to by the end of this week as well. So that's why it's considered a war crime, but we won the war. So we don't really talk about it all too much. Moving on, right, the last battle that I'll finally be done talking to you is the Battle of Berlin. This is the final battle of the European theater. The Russians enclosed the city of Berlin, which is the capital city of Germany, where the Nazi headquarters was. And we won. The war in Europe was done. By May 2nd, 1945. A few days after that, the Nazis officially surrendered. The Third Reich was no more. Um, America, England, and now free France and Russia won. Um, so, yay. On April 30th of 1945, Hitler and some of his closest followers killed themselves in the bunker beneath Berlin. The interesting fact about this is the Nazis were running out of soldiers. Remember, Hitler didn't care for his soldiers as much as like the Americans did or the British did. So if they died, okay, well, everyone's replaceable. Well, for the Battle of Berlin, Hitler was getting desperate. So he used the Hitler Youth as soldiers. Remember, you could be as young as like 8 or 10 years old to be in the Hitler Youth. And they were given assault rifles, and their instructions were to kill soldiers, kill the communists. So again, you're using small children to fight this battle for you. So Hitler killed himself because he, we'll talk more about this when we get to the Japanese, but similar thing. It is better to kill yourself on your own terms than for your enemy to capture you and you to be seen as a being defeated and a loser, and they torture you. All right, so this way you have a quick death versus a prolonged, torturous death. So that was kind of Hitler's mentality on that. Yes, he actually did kill himself, despite those stupid conspiracy theories that everyone reads. Well, he ran away to Argentina. No, he didn't. So he killed himself, as well as the main propaganda guy, Joseph Goebbels. We'll talk more about him next week when we talk about the Holocaust. He killed himself and his family, his children as well. So we'll get to that later. Here, most famously, is the city of Berlin, and that is the Soviet Union flag. All right, there it is, kind of waving over. It's really cool. So I went to Germany for my honeymoon. We went to Berlin for a few days, and in the city center of Berlin, there is this massive statue. I mean, the biggest statue I've ever seen in my life, of a Russian soldier. And this huge plaque in front of it. Some of it's in Russian, some of it's in German, and then there's an English portion. And to this day, in Germany, they still thank the Soviet soldiers for liberating Berlin, getting rid of Hitler, getting rid of the Nazis, down with the dictatorship. So they are still very grateful to the Russians for that, even after what the Russians did during the Cold War, which we'll get to later. Right, so they're very thankful. It was the Russians that liberated Berlin, not us. They got there first. We were working our way through France, and they made it there before us. So anyway, that's the story of the European theater. I apologize for the length of this video, although I'm also not that sorry. There will be another video later this week when we talk about the African and the Pacific theaters. All right. Again, stay safe, guys. I miss you guys so very much, and I wish I could just talk your ears off in class instead of via video. All right. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me. All right. Mad love.